Welcome to the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. We don't shy away and keep secrets here. We empower you with education, telling you the truth about all things aesthetic medicine while encouraging you to be the best version of yourself. It's time to look great and feel good doing it. This is your host, mom, speaker, and board-certified physician, Dr. Judith Borger.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 22 of the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. Today, I will be talking to Dr. Sarah Neitzel, who is a podiatrist and private practice pediatric surgeon in Washington State. She also owns a medically safe manicure and pedicure spa. She is a business coach who teaches others to enhance their private practices and open manicure and pedicure spas. Join us for a conversation about foot problems, manicures, pedicures, feet, and all things private practice business and business coaching. Here's my conversation with Dr. Sarah Neitzel. Dr. Neitzel, it is so excited to have a podiatrist here because, we really talk about all things wellness. And of course, our feet, our hands, our walking is really a big part of wellness. And I think a lot of women, especially we've burned our feet with the cute shoes and we thought podiatrists were for old people. And now we're kind of in this age where we're like, oh man, are we turning into the old people?
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing that you do, so let's first start out by just talking about some podiatry things. I had, you had kind of shared with me that one of your goals was to keep people walking healthy and safe, which I think is an amazing goal. And as I said, a lot of us are finding that maybe we haven't used good shoe wear, and I'm hearing a lot of bunions starting as a little bit of problems, especially in women and the high heels. And so I mean, what if somebody's starting to develop a bunion, how bad does it have to get to see a podiatrist? Sure. What are some of the things that we can do?
Sure. So, I mean, look, bunions are a little bit due to shoe gear. Mostly it actually has to do with how your joints function, and that stuff's genetic. So, don't beat yourself up too much about the cute shoes. I'm all for cute shoes. The truth is, if you're starting to get that bunion where it's kind of starting to shift over and look like your grandma's toes, if it's not hurting you yet, my general approach to that is hey, if it ain't broke, maybe don't fix it just yet. Because bunion surgery is uncomfortable, right? So I typically like my patients to be kind of at that point where this is starting to dictate their life a little bit. Are you starting to plan your day based on how long you can be on your foot, things like that. For the most part, if you're starting to get them, and I have them too, wearing the right type of shoes, wearing a good type of a running shoe, even if you're not a runner, or some over-the-counter inserts at the bare minimum, those can help kind of limit how much you're overloading that joint, and that's usually how that starts to happen. If it's not, real painful, you may just be able to wear those while you're exercising. And then if you're going to be in your cute heels for a couple of hours in a day, that's okay. That's not going to make or break you getting a bunion. It's when you're doing that repetitive walking motion and in the wrong shoes that it becomes an issue. So you want to be cute and go to dinner, you got to go to church, you do you. I'm not going to say anything about that for my patients, but if you're doing exercise and you're doing a lot of walking and you're really not wearing great shoes, you're kind of going for the cheapy, super flexible stuff, it's really not doing you any favors, and it probably will continue to get worse. But once it starts to get painful, that's when we need to talk about it, for sure.
That's awesome. One of the other things that you do, what was really cool to me, was that you do some fat pad allograft injections for people that, have some pain because of loss of the fat pad. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Okay. So this was something that I had wanted there to be a product out there for this forever. I really have this problem with my female patients, realistically. And I always kind of make the joke and tell them, look, this is one of life's really cruel jokes, is that we can't seem after a certain age as women to lose weight in places we want to, but we lose it the one place we need it, which is the bottom of your foot. And so I have a lot of people that it just starts to get really, really painful when they're trying to be barefoot, or if they're just like standing in the shower. There is an opportunity there if you're putting too much pressure down and you don't have any more of that shock absorbing cushion, that you could start to even develop wounds on the bottom of the foot. So there's a lot of reasons to think about trying to make that more comfortable. The other big one that I see is, if you're starting to shift your weight a little bit because you've got one spot underneath that's just like super painful to walk on, then you'll end up with tendonitis. You'll be coming in with muscle cramps. Like, you're going to be seeing me for a whole bunch of other stuff other than just the loss of the fat pad. So there's problems with putting general like products that are obviously a little bit cheaper underneath the foot, because that whole area in like the forefoot pad is all kind of one continuous space. And so before, when people were trying to put in like Botox and things that are kind of artificial fillers, it would shift out of the way. Yeah, it just goes to wherever there's no pressure on it, because you're walking on it and it can shift, right? Which is different than having it in your face. So, there's now products that are coming out where they're basically taking these really kind of young fat cells, and we're able to inject those into a certain area. And then I kind of take pressure off of it with specialty shoes and padding for about 3 weeks, because that's about how long it takes for cells to turn over. And basically they're in there and they're live cells. So they start grabbing around at everything and making attachments so they actually stay in place. And then after 3 weeks, I can get people start walking again, and that fat just continues to kind of fill up. So we've been having some really, really good results with people that were like not able to walk on parts of their feet for years. And now they're, padding around barefoot around their house and they're super happy. So
yeah. And I love some of the points that you mentioned. And one of them is really that, I think what you're telling us is really to seek out podiatric care, to not kind of wait until it's like disabling your life,
please
but to
don't.
really be like, this is starting to be a thing that maybe bothers me regularly. And maybe I should go see an expert before I like completely calcify that tendon or run that fat pad down. Sort of like everything with preach, like prevention and early treatment is so much better until you wait till the only thing you have left is like the big invasive surgical treatments, which I'm sure you do too, but the recovery is a lot longer.
But it's very different, right? And like everything else, I mean, the sooner you get to it, the better your overall outcomes. So, whether it's surgery, if I get to somebody surgically early enough, we can do things minimal invasive through little tiny holes. I don't have to do the big open surgery with all the hardware. If you wait too long and you're like barely walking on it and all your angles are all messed up at that point, then we're going to have a real big surgery and a real big recovery, and you're going to see a lot of me for a few months.
The other thing that you do, what has really sparked my interest that I think my patients are and my listeners are really going to love, is that you own a medically safe manicure and pedicure spa in the greater Seattle area. So for my listeners, like, what does that even mean? Like, what's a medically safe,
right.
manicure and pedicure spa?
And to kind of tell you how this came about from like a physician standpoint, I cannot tell you how many patients of mine have gotten fungus from going to places that just don't like the way they're cleaning instruments, not the way a doctor's office would clean instruments, right? Like my version of cleanliness for bacteria and fungus, very, very different from general public, understandably so. But when you're going to somewhere where you're kind of being moved through and there's a whole lot of people, things aren't really getting cleaned all that well usually. There's some processes in place, but it's not as good. So I run into a lot of fungal infections. I run into a lot of bacterial infections from ingrowns that, technicians went after that they really probably shouldn't have. It also is really hard when we've got people who, their skin is really thin, or maybe they have neuropathy and they can't feel anything. And so if somebody goes after them with one of those kind of electrical buffer callus shavers, like those things are aggressive. I don't know if you've ever had it done to you. I've had it done to me, and it's a little aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see some of my older patients, really like it's just tearing up their skin. And there's certain parts of the pedicure that we all go back for, right? The massage is amazing. Totally get that. And I'm all for it. But I had a lot of patients that like, it just really wasn't a safe option. And I was having to tell them like, no, don't go to someone else to take care of your feet. Even though, maybe they have trouble seeing their feet, maybe they can't bend over to reach their feet, it was still somehow safer for them to do it at home, which is a little crazy in my opinion. If you can't see what you're doing, that's going to be an issue. So, normally podiatry historically has done a lot of, nail and callus care for people. But I got to say, like, insurance is really changing the game on that. They really, really dictate like who we can do that for and who we can't. And it really has to be medically necessary. And unfortunately, a lot of people that really need it, like insurance is not going to see that as medically necessary. So I decided to put in a like medically safe nail spa. So it's manicures and pedicures. And essentially it is done in a way that I know the equipment is autoclaved. So it is surgically sterile. It is the exact same protocols that I use on my surgical instrumentation. It's not hard to run it through an autoclave, and it's not abnormal for me to have that in an office. Everything else is done single use. All of my products I have chosen myself. And I actually like went down the rabbit hole of reading like what's on the back of every product, right? So that I know if what the product is promising that it can do, it actually can do, which most of the time they can't. And then the other part of it is, do they have chemicals in there that, yes, make them really effective, but might actually be really unsafe on the wrong type of patient? And, general consumers, you're not going to know that. You're not going to know that salicylic acid, which is in all of those foot peels and really good callus removers, is also going to take off the skin on the rest of your foot. So there's certain people that I absolutely would recommend, not having any of those products on their feet. So I've been really careful to make sure that I've got a certified nail technician in there that is trained on, general foot conditions to watch for, to make sure that it's not something that a podiatrist needs to see. That we're using products that I know are going to be safe across the board for all of my patients, whether they're autoimmune or immunocompromised. And then also that everything is done sterilely. I don't have to worry about the fungal infections, and we don't have to worry about the bacterial infections out of that. So it really was born out of a place of need in the community for this. And at this point, it's kind of just exploded. Like, she is so busy. She's booked out like 3 or 4 weeks.
That's awesome.
Which is great. But
and do you do like the whole range of nail things? I mean, do you also do the gel and the dip and the acrylics, or do you just do manicure and pedicures because you believe that that's the most sort of medically safe?
Yeah, we have, I am totally open to gel. I did a lot of research on gel. Gel is fine to use on the nails. Acrylic is really pretty unhealthy for the nails in general. And it takes a lot of chemicals and a lot of ventilation and a lot of special equipment. And so when I came down to deciding whether or not I wanted to do that, I just decided, it's not good for the nails anyways. And I really don't want my staff breathing that in. Patients shouldn't breathe that in. So we don't do acrylics. Dip is interesting because if it's done right, it's fine. But you almost have to take a small amount of the dip into a separate like container or a separate bag and then dip the client's nails. And then that has to get thrown out, in my opinion, like if you're really doing it the proper way. So when your nails are just kind of shoved into the general canister that everybody else has been like, it's not really clean.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Like, I love getting my nails done, but you're absolutely right. Like some of these issues I'm raising, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should reconsider this beautiful dip that I absolutely love.
Right. And if it's, like I said, if it's done right and it's done individually, but I actually think it's probably fine.
That.
But
like,
it's expensive to do that.
Right,
like,
exactly. Because like I totally know that they take number 329 off the shelf, dip my nails, and then put it right back on the shelf.
Call it good. Yeah. That's, and that is unfortunately how a lot of things are done. It's cheaper that way. And I understand from a bottom line business standpoint why they would do that. It's just, if it was me, it's not what I would want done. Yeah. I just know better at this point.
Yeah. So, those of us, and I'm sure, a lot of my listeners also love getting their nails done and they don't
Yeah,
have access to a place like yours,
sure.
what should they kind of look for when they go
Yeah.
to a nail salon or a nail spa? What are some of the things that's absolute no, that are absolute yeses? Is there certain things that we can request or ask for?
Sure, sure. Yeah. And, this will kind of harken back to what I used to tell people before I opened this up, right? My biggest things are, cleanliness, right? So, pretty much my opinion, everybody should have those disposable bowl liners. Like, there's no reason that you should be putting your foot in the same water or even the same basin that somebody else was just in, without there being at least a liner down for you individually. So that would be part one to watch for. The second thing is, on like callus scrubbers or any kind of, electronics, callus shaver, anything. Is this something that has either been autoclaved? So like, I hate the cheese graters. Those just shouldn't exist. But is it something that is either can be autoclaved or is single use? Single use is my preferred, to be honest. I don't want something that has been potentially used on somebody else. Obviously, that's how fungus spreads. And then the other thing is, honestly, if you can pick up on Amazon, like your little individualized nail care toolkit, right? So like, you have every right to bring that in and be like, here's the tools we're going to use today. And I think that is, how those have been taken care of. So that is a much cleaner way and a lot safer way in giving you that, kind of mental, I'm happier and I feel more comfortable doing it this way. My big fear when I go in places, and Lord knows I have been into some where, I'm going, oh my God, I don't want to say anything, but I know this isn't good. It's like when tools or like callus scrubbers or something get pulled out of somebody's pocket. I'm like, no. Like,
Right. Or some
I don't know.
drawer.
Yeah. Like, where was that before you just shoved it in your pocket? So those are kind of things to watch for. I can pretty well assume most places are not actually using an autoclave. Really, truly. It's a more expensive piece of equipment. I think it's totally worth the investment, but I do surgery. So to me, that's always worth the investment. The UV light sterilizers just don't really do it. They just don't. So, I mean, that would be kind of the bare minimum, but I would like to see that they're at least putting them in some kind of like cold sterilization tray in between clients. That would be one of the things I would probably look for.
And it's really interesting that you sort of say those things, because in my aesthetic, medicine office, we do medical grade facials too. And it is sort of a little bit that same idea, is the fact that not only do we really use high quality products, our staff is higher trained, but even with single things, we have like a 3-step, or maybe even 4-step disinfection process, that really it, and it isn't just like rinsing it off and throwing it under UV light. I mean, it involves like all sorts of things to make sure. And the same as you, we do a lot of single use, and you do a lot of disposable, and everything has extra plastic things over it to protect it. And, I think what patients need to realize is that it's a whole different game. And also that stuff is really your health, your safety, your well-being. And also that, you can't then do such a thing as a price competition, because you're getting something completely different that is just done in such a more high quality, safer, again, medically supervised, essentially.
Right. And even though, you may not have a physician as the one that is doing the service for you. Like you still have a technician that has been, trained with that physician to know what to watch for and make sure that everything's happening the way that it should. And in some cases, for like some of our diabetic patients, if that conversation is had with the nail technician, she knows not to go after their cuticles, because that's like an opportunity for infection, and if they are needing to be done, they're done totally with sterile tools and that kind of thing. You can't compete with that terms of cleanliness, and in terms of service, and we've added extra things in there. Like we have a CBD rub that, we will utilize for people with neuropathy. And if they don't want to use CBD, we've got arnica and other, non CBD options. And it's really, we've also made this like kind of an individual experience, so we only have 2 chairs in this spa, and I have 1 nail tech. So she can do pairs. But this was a decision that I made during COVID also. Everybody needed to be 6 feet apart. And unfortunately, in a lot of salons, not only did they kind of shut down for a while, but then when they reopened, it was like you just had a piece of plastic and you're still in like these chairs that are like right next to each other.
And like of course, like all the patients that you see with diabetes that causes neuropathy, with vascular disease, those are the things that put you at higher risk for any of the COVID related complications.
Right. So this really became a nice option for people to be able to go into. And I really think that it makes sense for a podiatry office to have something like this available for their people, and even if it's not your patients that are there. I mean, this is a totally separate business. So she's got clients that I have never seen as patients, and I have patients that she's never seen as clients. And sometimes the two will kind of cross over, but it's not a requirement. Anybody who just is really concerned about their overall health and cleanliness when they're getting this kind of foot care done, it's a good option. They just come see her. And if they need to see me, great. Like we make an appointment, they can come see me, it's not like a requirement that there has to be that shared experience, but we've made sure that everything is, as safe, obviously with COVID as our office was. And that was a really big part. And that's part of the price point too. I mean, you're paying for that individual kind of very relaxing private experience.
And really, it's been a recurrent theme too, is that really, and I think it has something to do with worthiness too. Like you deserve to be safe. You deserve to have the best care. Like you deserve more than that shared bowl of yuck. Like, right?
Yes. Please don't go dip your foot in that. Yeah.
When I was in Asia, they did, they have those little fish tanks.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Fish. I've always wanted to try that.
Oh, you want to try it?
Weird?
I could not get over it. The fact that like somebody else just had their foot in there and there's fish and the fish poop in there. I was like,
yeah, I don't know.
Even I got creeped out. Part of me wanted to try it, but I just couldn't quite get myself.
Yeah. I think it like, it sounds really cool. And there's part of me that really wants to try it. But yeah, if I saw a bowl full like fish poop and fish, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not putting my foot in there. Thanks, I'm good.
Was it hard for you to figure out how to run a nail spa, like from a business perspective was?
Yeah, I mean, it was a learning curve. The biggest thing is like, so I wanted to do this in residency. Like this was something that like 9 years ago, I was sitting there going, how come nobody's doing this? And I started kind of pinging some of my attendings about like, hey, I'm thinking I might want to do private practice with this. And I just got shot down. Like they were like, you can't do that. That's just silly. That's not anything podiatry does. That's not medical, da, 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 da. And so I thought like, okay, there's got to be a reason that nobody's doing this, right? Like, let's kind of hang out, watch. I'll see what the reasons really are. Maybe there is a medical reason why this is not a good idea. And the truth is, it's just because it's a separate business. That's it. Like it is difficult to run a private practice anyways, right? It's a business. Like we all are doing that as it is. And sometimes things aren't so great with that business. And like the idea of taking on a second business that might be also additionally stressful is a lot for people. And, the thing is, it's funny that you say this because I'm totally coming out with a course on like how to take this from an idea to execution. So for medical practices, because I did a lot of learning, did a lot of talking over with an attorney to figure out like, okay, how do you separate the liabilities of this from a practice? Because that was probably the number one thing, right? My malpractice is not going to cover if something happens with the nail tech. Right. So like there are things to consider with that, your separate business licensing, how to really like keep that separate. And then, knowing what equipment to buy and what products to do. And what you're going to need to do is like your initial investment. And I think there's different levels that you could take this at. There are like kind of more compact, smaller ways to do this within your office. But I think that like liability wise and growth wise, this has such a huge potential to grow. I totally think it's worth like setting it up right the first time, like set it up as its own thing, get the nice chairs, like, get the
and at least,
chairs.
and then there's state to state specific regulations too, because I know in North Carolina, like there's certain services that my esthetician have asked me about adding that just to do that would require a whole separate like spa license versus like the license we have now, so that obviously we all want to be, I hope so, compliant, and we want to do it legally, and and then sometimes you have to evaluate like which part of the business is worth it or not. But it's great for people that we do have a lot of physicians listening that are interested in maybe adding that. And I assume, even though you're a podiatrist, I mean, this is something that family practice could do, that internal medicine could do, geriatrics. I mean, this is really, of course, podiatry, but it really seems like the kind of sort of branching out. And I do a lot of coaching, and we have a course on how to start your own aesthetics practice, so it's kind of cool to talk to somebody who's like doing similar things for another field.
Yeah, because you're right, it can totally be used in just about any situation, and it really doesn't take that much space, like really truly it doesn't. And you just have to set it up right. And once you get through the initial like setup, oh my gosh, this business runs itself. Like I have a nail tech. She is experienced, so she knows when she needs to order things. She's really good with knowing, how well things are going. She's got a good pulse on it. But a lot of that was kind of our initial discussions on how to run this. And so essentially she's running everything. I'm overseeing it, which is exactly where I need to be as a physician, because I'm also still really busy with patients. And, I mean, the amount that it actually costs to run a nail spa is so minimal compared to the cost it is to run a practice, right? Like, especially if you're doing any regenerative treatments, like those products are really expensive.
And I mean, I think that's what people have to understand, especially in the aesthetic space, right? When people, and a lot of times too, when I talk to spa owners that want to partner or somebody like that, when they know that our costs for fillers and PRP is more than 50% of what we charge, they're like, oh my God, my consumables are like 5%, 7%, 10%, and that's an expensive procedure, like, right? So that's really interesting, really interesting to know from a business perspective.
And I think you're probably about right. I think it's probably about 5 or 10%, honestly, in terms of consumables that actually like get used up. And then, then you've got your staff fee, and essentially I rent that space from myself in the office. So, I mean, you can pretty well make that whatever you need it to, but it's got a really stable model, and it's got a good profit margin, and it runs whether I am here or not, because Lord knows I do not want to be in the office 5 days a week, and I'm not currently. I know it's like, I'm just not going to do that anymore.
And I love talking to you, because in the future we should totally like also cross teach for our courses, because it's kind of one of the things that I do in a lot of my business coaching is like, I want to help people build businesses that work for them in their lives, right? So we're going to kind of veer off into a little bit of an entrepreneurship journey, but for all of those who are listening that are entrepreneurs, it's so easy to just hustle and try to chase numbers. In the end, you're not taking anything home, and you're working 7 days a week, and you're doing all the stuff that, most of us become entrepreneurs because we want the freedom, we love the creativity, we want to really help people without sort of that corporate like structure and middleman that a lot of us feel kind of constrained by. So really, when I think about what does my business do well, it's really to help my patient population
Mhm.
to create exactly the atmosphere and the warm welcoming that I want. And then
Mhm.
it also allows me to help patients in a way that I want.
Right.
But at the same time, like you, I'm part-time. Like, and
Right.
because I love my family, I love my
Yeah.
life, I love
Yeah.
to exercise.
You have a
There's a
life.
lot of things like, yeah. And it is what I also want to teach other entrepreneurs to do, is to
Yes.
build really, and that's what we always say, build businesses that work for you
Yeah.
and your lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a really cool thing, because you and I are definitely aligned on that. Like, that is one of the biggest things that I'm now like coaching other doctors to do, is like, how do you build a private practice that's going to work for you? I mean, I, when I first came out of residency, I was like so awesome at seeing like 40 to 50 people a day. I could do it 6 days a week. I had the energy of an Energizer bunny, and that has gone down. Like, I do not have that kind of energy. And, I'm a solo doc. I'm looking to hire somebody else and bring them in, but it's a process that takes some time, because you are, like you said, you've really cultivated this practice in the way that works for you. You've got a certain kind of aesthetic, certain vibe, your certain relationship with your patients. So bringing somebody into that, you want to make sure it's the right person. In the meantime, I have like a 5,000 patient docket, and I just can't do 6 days a week. Like, if I opened my schedule, it would fill. And right now, I mean, I'm booked out all the way to December, which, good problem to have, don't get me
That's
wrong,
awesome.
but it's like, I really, for my own well-being, I discovered I can't work a half a day and then go home. I don't do that. Like, my brain does not shut off and separate the two. So instead, I've realized, like, once I'm at work, I'm solid. So I'll go, like, today I'm going to work from like 9 till 6 or 7. And then, I typically have like Fridays completely off, because that is my day to work on my coaching business and be with my family and do all the other things that I really want to do. And that works for me. Now, is that the answer for everybody? No, but I am certainly there to help them figure out what is the right answer for you. How do you perform at your best and still get what you need out of this? Because this is a business that's supposed to serve you and your patients. Like, do
Well, and
not
I
forget
think
about
that's
you.
I think that's what kind of, when I hope that when people listening that aren't physicians realize is like, one of the reasons you get the care that you get is because I run the business that I run. Like,
Right.
right? One of the reasons I am joyful and I'm happy and I'm available for you, and I
Yes.
am kind of not rushing you out the door, and
Right.
I'm not
Right.
stressed out, and I'm kind of showing up as the person with kind of the open heart and the open and listening,
Yes.
is because I take care of my own wellness. Like,
Yes.
right? I think sometimes it's easy to have the lay people, and I don't mean it as a separation, but have people that aren't in medicine kind of not understanding sort of the stress and the responsibility and all that stuff. And all they
Yes.
see is like, well, I have to wait 3 weeks for my appointment. Like, why
Right.
can't you just work a Friday? Like,
Right.
right? But the
Right.
point is, like, you love my practice, you love that your appointment is a half hour,
Yes.
you love the fact that
Yeah.
I like creating this welcoming atmosphere that comes with, like, you can't, it's sort of like you can't have, and you don't want to have McDonald's speed at,
Right.
like, your high-end
Right.
restaurant. It's like
Right.
they're two separate things. So if you desire this concierge taken care of, high elevated
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
and also a physician that serves as a role model,
Yes.
it does come with a waiting list, and it
Yep.
does come with you not necessarily being able to, in your case, get a Friday appointment.
Yep. Yep. And it's just, and that's what I, like you said, like, that's what I have to do that for my well-being. But the thing that has been a really cool experience in being a business owner is like being able to figure out how it is that I can do what I need to do for me by like taking Fridays off, and still be able to give my patients that experience in like less time for me. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And that involved working longer hours. And luckily I'm able to handle doing that. But I think you're totally right on the if your physician isn't doing well, your treatment's not going to be ideal. It's really not. Like, we can only give to other people when we have like filled our own cup, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And if we can make sure that we're providing that service in a way that's really, really going to serve our patients, we have to be double checking on ourselves too. It just has to happen.
Absolutely. And especially being in the health and wellness space, I also really strongly sort of believe in modeling what I preach, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have listened to the podcast, if you follow some of my coaching, not only do I do business coaching, but we do some life coaching. You know, I
Yes.
obviously talk a lot about wellness and health with all of my patients.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
you know, I live that. I don't
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you know, I don't just say that. So
Yeah. No, and
sounds like you're doing the same thing.
I am doing the same thing over here. It is such a nice thing to talk to somebody else who understands.
I love it. I love it. As I said, like, I love it. I love it. I love it. So, you know, people that, especially entrepreneurs, physicians that are interested in maybe exploring this for themselves, or that are really
Yeah.
like, wow, Sarah, you have this part that I'm really struggling with and are looking for
Yeah.
some business coaching.
Yeah.
Where can they find you?
So the coaching business is actually called Visionary Practice Solutions.
Okay.
And you can find us at, www.visionarypracticesolutions.com. I do have some podcast episodes. We've been getting that started. Yeah, I know. It's, there's been quite a few questions that it's like, yeah, I could probably like actually just talk about this and reach a lot more people this way. So we've started that. And I will be having that course come out here pretty soon for kind of how to put a medical nail spa, as like an adjunct business to your practice. So I think having that kind of passive income is also, a thing that a lot of physicians need to consider, because, when things aren't going quite the way they want to, and you have hiccups in your practice, it's really nice to be able to have.
So I don't,
available.
I don't consider it completely passive. Let me just add that, because you're still running the spa. It's not like a syndication, but I consider it not tied one-on-one to your time. So I think it's sort of the next level of leverage. If we're going to be really clear on sort of like what this provides for people from a business perspective, that it's not the same as, and you invest in somebody else's business and you have nothing to do
and then
with
you have nothing to do with it.
It's just like more like a level of when we talk about business leverage. Up from you being the person seeing the people, and only when you see the people you get reimbursed for your services. It's sort of the level of leverage that you provide the direction and the oversight, but the daily appointments the management is run by somebody else. Yeah,
and that is more. You're right, because that is more what I meant by passive, was basically that like you're not trading your time for money, like exactly. Right, so like it's not a one-for-one exchange, right? Yeah, but it is not like passive like syndication investing. No.
Well, I just want to make sure that people understand that, like, right?
They're
not buying into your practice. They will still have to do something.
Right. You will still need to put some work into it initially. Yes. And then after that, it does get to pretty smooth sailing, and you just kind of are checking in and overseeing. And it's definitely a lot easier than running your practice. That's for sure.
and obviously that speaks to your business acumen and also your employee considerations and all of that, which I'm sure is all that you talk about in your course, because it's all that I talk about in my course. All part of it. Employees are so important. I mean, we're so lucky right now with who we have. But once you get to a certain level, employees definitely become the conversation piece.
It is, and especially right now, it's definitely a hard thing. So I have been really, really blessed with the team that I have, both in the practice and in the spa. And I just check in with them constantly, like, what do you need? Are we good? Are you happy? What would because I just, at this point, it's more like employee retention than trying to hire necessarily. So
for people that are in the greater Seattle area, what is your actual practice and nail spa called?
So the practice is Peninsula Podiatry. We are over in Silverdale, Washington, and it's across the water from Seattle, but still just a ferry ride away. And then the spa is actually called Pure Peninsula Spa.
Okay.
Yeah, and those can both be found online.
So before we wrap up, is there any other like podiatric? I'm so sorry.
No, you're good
with that word.
It's not an easy word.
Are there any other sort of things that maybe your average population that does aesthetics, so middle-aged women to like earlier, later, anybody is like a common thing that we could quickly have a common question on, or did we maybe cover a lot of it?
I think we covered a lot of it. The only other thing that I would say is, I've been trying to really get the word out that despite the fact that I do surgery and that's what I was trained in, like that shouldn't be your first line of treatment. And I don't want somebody to assume that just because they have problems like a bunion or tendon issues or even a tendon tear, that like, oh, that means I have to have surgery. There are a lot of different regenerative treatment options at this point that can keep people out of surgery. And, I know this because I went through tendon surgery at the end of residency. Like, I totally am honest with my patients when I tell them it is going to be a year before you're super glad we did this. And sure enough, it is. It took me a year. It takes them a year to get over a tendon repair. It's a big investment to go through that kind of thing. But had I had the option of having like amniotic regenerative injections and some of these other things that we now have available, oh, I would have jumped on that in a heartbeat. So I would say, just get out there and get the opinion about whether there's other options out there. There aren't a ton of practices doing it, but we certainly do it. I do second opinions for people all the time. And, I think it's worth asking the question because you deserve to have some treatment options that are going to work for you as opposed to surgery. So I would just seek those options out. Like, don't be afraid to ask those questions.
All right, people, you heard it. Make friends with your local podiatrist.
Yes.
They're pretty cool. Like, I wish you were here because like I feel like we would have hours and hours of stuff to talk about.
I know, we probably would.
Well, we will link all of Dr. Neitzel's information into the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. And this was a fascinating conversation.
Yes.
And people, if you have podiatry questions, business questions, you can always send them into, I will forward them or follow her, find her.
Absolutely.
She's really a great physician person and business coach. So thank you again for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Aesthetic Doctor podcast with Dr. Judith Borger. We'd love to connect with you outside of the show. Follow Dr. Borger on Instagram at Dr. Borger and find more online and ways to work with Dr. Borger at www.theaestheticdoctor.com. Until next time, be well.